Andre might be remembered as a legend, but behind the scenes, he wasn't particularly well liked, with accounts of explosive and openly racist outbursts aimed at Bad News Brown.
He started making these racist remarks and he started throwing the N-word around.
He even humiliated Big John Studd so badly that he disappeared from the locker room afterward.
When I saw John Studd get the crap beat out of him, picked up his bags, walked out of the dressing room, and never saw John again.
His feud with Kamala was yet another example of how tense and uncomfortable his backstage relationships could get.
Andre, let me tell you one thing. The longest day you live, don't you ever with me like that no more.
WWE legends are now finally explaining why Andre the Giant was quietly removed from the spotlight, with Kamala playing a key role in that story.
And it's a great story in your book, and it's kind of an infamous story with you, is Andre the Giant was a bit racist towards you, and apparently you pulled a gun on him.
Our first story takes us back to the early 1980s in a territory wrestling promotion called Mid-South Sports, to a confrontation so explosive it nearly ended in bloodshed, centered on James Harris, better known as Kamala the Ugandan Giant, who was born on May 28, 1950, in Centopia, Mississippi, to sharecropper parents, grew up in extreme poverty on a cotton plantation, endured a brutal childhood marked by hardship and the unsolved murder of his father after a dice game, was shaped and hardened by the systemic racism of the era that gave him a powerful survival instinct for the ruthless world of professional wrestling, and by 1982 had been transformed by Jerry the King Lawler into a cannibalistic savage with face and body paint, a leopard skin loincloth, and a tribal mask, howling, slapping his belly, and pretending to eat raw meat during matches in a gimmick rooted in offensive racial stereotypes that nevertheless drew massive crowds and huge paydays in the racially charged South. Leading to the night, he was booked to wrestle Andre the Giant for the very first time in Oklahoma City, a moment best told in Kamala's own words.
But here's the thing, the first time I ever wrestled Andre the Giant was in Oklahoma City in 1982 for Mid-South Sports. So I had never wrestled him before. And I might have did get a spot mixed up. And Andre threw me up often, and he called me a dumb SOB. And he jumped up. When he come up, that's when I beat the hell out of him. Right there in the ring. And I mean, that was for real.
Now let's pause and consider what just happened, because a relatively new wrestler in his very first match with the biggest star in the industry had just beaten the hell out of Andre the Giant in front of a live audience, and in his autobiography Kamala Speaks, Harris wrote that he backed Andre into the turnbuckle and landed multiple legitimate shots while Andre, weakened by acromegaly, could not properly defend himself. But the story was far from over.
And after the next night, we were wrestling each other in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So anyway, I had this 357 Magnum. I put it in my pocket, and I went over there to Andre the Giant in his dressing room. I stuck my finger on his nose, and he threw up both hands. And now, he didn't see a gun. He just threw up his hand till I saw it, with that big smile on his face. I sorry, boss. I sorry. I didn't mean to say that or do that. I sorry.
Think about that for a moment, because here was Kamala, a 410-pound man, walking into Andre's dressing room with a loaded .357 Magnum in his pocket, fully ready to use it if the Giant made the wrong move, as the confrontation continued to escalate.
Andre, let me tell you one thing. The longest day you live, don't you ever with me like that no more. I said, I would kill you. He said, oh, boss, he was pointing at his head. He said, oh, boss, I'm sorry. I don't think. I'm sorry, boss, I don't think. You know, with that French accent. I said, well, motherfucker, get the tinking from now on. You better get the tinking from now on.
Remarkably, that confrontation changed everything, because from that day forward Andre and Kamala had what Kamala described as great matches everywhere they went, and Andre even helped Kamala get into the WWF. Kamala later had his girlfriend sew a hidden pocket into his wrestling trunks to hide a .22 caliber pistol, which he eventually replaced with a small knife he carried for 15 years even after Andre's death in 1993. But while that moment proved the Giant could be humbled in private, the next incident would expose him in public as drunk, reckless, and using the one word that could end everything on a crowded bus in Japan involving Bad News Brown. Because if Kamala's story showed Andre backing down when directly confronted, this next tale revealed a much darker side tied to racism, alcohol, and a New Japan Pro Wrestling tour bus that nearly turned into a battleground, as Alan Coage, known to wrestling fans as Bad News Brown, was no ordinary wrestler but an Olympic bronze medalist in heavyweight judo at the 1976 Montreal Games and the first American to medal in the sport, giving him real fighting credibility through black belts in judo and other martial arts and a reputation as one of the toughest real fighters in the business. And in 1980, during a New Japan tour, Koich found himself on a long bus ride with stars like Hulk Hogan, Dusty Rhodes, and Stan Hansen, while Andre the Giant sat in the back heavily intoxicated, doing something that would permanently change their relationship, a moment best told in Bad News Brown's own words.
And he started making these racist remarks, and he started throwing the N-word around and everything. And I'm like half asleep, and I can't believe what I'm hearing. What? So then I said, Hogan, not Hogan, excuse me. I said, Giant, Andre. Yeah, what is it? I said, you watch your mouth. I said, I don't like what you're saying. I said, that's an insult to me, you know. And so he didn't say nothing. And then he, as the bus was going, he says, bad news. I said, yeah. He says, go f*** yourself. So I told the bus driver, pull over.
Now the story takes a terrifying turn, because Hulk Hogan, who was sitting directly behind Bad News Brown, would later explain what was going through his mind during that confrontation.
He says, Alan, I'd like to tell you something. And I said, what is that? He says, when I saw you reach out in your bag, he said, I ducked up under the chairs. And what are you talking about? He says, I never seen nobody talk to Andre like this. I figured this guy's got a gun. He's going to come out, he's going to turn around, he's going to shoot him, look over, see me, and then he's going to shoot me.
But Bad News Brown wasn't finished, as he stayed awake all night stewing over the disrespect. And the next morning, he waited by the hotel elevator, confronting Andre as soon as he stepped out.
And as he got off the elevator, I said, Andre, I want to talk to you. What is it? I said, let's go outside. He didn't want to go. I said, no, let's step outside. If I wanted to do something to you, I'd have jumped you as soon as he got off the elevator. Let's go outside right now. And I told him, I said, look, I don't appreciate the way you were talking on the bus. I said, you never hear me insult your people. He said, well, I'm Polish and people. And I said, you don't hear that from me. So if you feel that way, that's your business. I don't have to listen to that nonsense, I said, don't let me ever hear you say that again. So he apologized.
The tension between them lingered for years, as they worked the same tours but never spoke. Yet remarkably, before Andre passed away in 1993, they buried the hatchet, sitting down to talk through their differences with Andre apologizing and making peace. Because sometimes men fought back, other times the Giant didn't wait to be challenged, deciding who deserved punishment and turning the ring into a courtroom with only one verdict. The Iron Sheik. And if the stories of Kamala and Bad News Brown showed that Andre could be confronted and humbled, our next tale reveals what happened when someone couldn't fight back and Andre chose to teach them a lesson they would never forget, involving Hussein Khosrow Ali Vaziri, the Iron Sheik, a former Greco-Roman wrestler and bodyguard for the Shah of Iran, whose amateur background made him a notoriously stiff worker, delivering moves with real force rather than pulling punches. Something Andre absolutely despised, as according to Bobby Heenan, Andre hated how Sheik treated weekend warriors, the jobbers just trying to earn extra money without getting hurt. And Tom Pritchard stated that if Andre didn't like you, he had all the power to make you look bad in the ring. A story best explained in Pritchard's own words.
It's funny, like, if he liked somebody, he really liked them, it seemed like. If he didn't like them, he just hated their guts. Like, him and Kamala didn't get along, him and Bad News Brown just seemed like he just hated their guts, flat out.
Yeah, I think that goes, not just with Andre, but I mean with anybody in the business or anybody in something like this where you see each other every day, and sometimes you're not the most, people who don't have manners or respect and things like that. And maybe the Sheik's habit might have caught up to it.
On September 7th, 1984, at Nassau Coliseum in New York, Andre delivered what many describe as a 20-minute legitimate beatdown on the Iron Sheik, completely dominating for the opening bell as Sheik landed no meaningful strikes while Andre mauled him with hip tosses, suplexes, and full-force slams, even standing his full weight on Sheik's back multiple times without using the ropes to ease the pressure. A punishment reserved for opponents he truly disliked, though the Iron Sheik had his own grievances against Andre, particularly regarding how the Giant treated his fans, a story best told in the Iron Sheik's own words.
And then we go Paris, we go London, we go Japan. People come asking for autograph. The little baby and mother, he tell the little baby and mother, no, get the out of here. After that he was not Giant next to me. He was the little mouse. And that's because he's gone and we are up. See, what's going wrong, come back wrong. So he was a big Giant, but he was a jabroni big Giant. Fuck him, and he's gone.
The Iron Sheik's hatred ran so deep that he once symbolically spat on Andre's image during a shoot interview, calling him a no-good who didn't care about fans or fellow wrestlers, and their animosity was never resolved, with Andre passing in 1993 and the Iron Sheik in 2023 without any public reconciliation, because when warnings were given but ignored, the message wasn't delivered backstage, it was delivered with a fist, as Michael experienced during the aftermath of the screwjob, fearing that Owen might shoot on him, wrestling terminology meaning to actually try to hurt your opponent rather than cooperate in the illusion of combat. And this fear was not entirely unfounded, since Owen's loyalty to his brother was legendary and the rage he felt when Bret was wronged was no secret. Whether Michaels' concerns were justified or simply a convenient excuse for working with a member of the Hart family remains debated among historians. But what is certain is that this situation derailed Owen's planned push, as a darker character direction could have elevated him to new heights in the company, and the genuine backstage tension between Owen and Shawn Michaels became emblematic of the larger conflict.
He was never willing. He hated the Warrior.
Right, that's what I'm saying. To put him over in 10 seconds.
And that was the Vince thing. And yeah, I don't know. Because that, I guess, it was probably more his idea to do it in 10 seconds because he didn't want to be in the ring at all with the Warrior. Not for 10 seconds. So for him to do the job in 10 seconds was less painful than to have to be in the ring with him for 2 minutes.
Gotcha.
Because he hated.
I was going to say, it's been...
The conflict between the Hart family and Shawn Michaels' notorious backstage faction, known as the Clique, which also included Triple H and wielded enormous influence behind the scenes, created countless moments of friction during this era, particularly in their ongoing clashes with Owen Hart, and one member in particular seemed relentless in antagonizing the youngest Hart brother, as Triple H, born Paul Levesque, a central figure in the later, even more influential faction D-Generation X and a key player in the backstage politics that defined WWF in the late 1990s, found himself directly opposed to the Hart family on multiple occasions, with his conflicts with Owen Hart marked by real behind-the-scenes tension, perhaps best exemplified when Triple H and his faction began referring to Owen as a nugget, which wasn't just a playful nickname in wrestling parlance but a deliberate way of calling him insignificant, a clear insult aimed at undermining one of the world's best technical wrestlers, and this attitude set the stage for an incident where Owen Hart, like Big John Studd, standing at 6 feet 10 inches and nearly 400 pounds, made the fatal mistake of thinking he could share that distinction, a story recounted by Demolition's Axe.
When I saw John Studd get the crap beat out of him, picked up his bags, walked out of the dressing room, and never saw John again, because John refused to not step over the top rope. Why would you do that? That's Andre's gimmick. At least when you're wrestling Andre, be cordial enough to step under the top rope, not over the top rope, when you've been asked by the guy that does it a number of times, and he paid the consequence.
But the top rope wasn't the only issue, because according to former Intercontinental Champion Ken Patera, Studd began using growth hormone in his mid-30s, growing 3 to 5 inches taller and acting like a giant, which Andre, who lived with the natural consequences of excess growth hormone from acromegaly, resented, and perhaps worst of all was the promo that sealed Studd's fate as Jake the Snake. Roberts recounted on his podcast that Studd did an interview calling Andre not a giant, but a freak, which deeply offended Andre, hitting the fan immediately, since calling him a freak directly referenced his medical condition and appearance, the ultimate insult to a man already sensitive about his acromegaly, a story Aaron Anderson later described in detail after the top rope incident.
I do know he had heat with the wrong cat, and that was Andre the Giant. And they had a hell of an episode where, you know, and this is a behind the scenes thing that you learn later, but I guess the Giant had a quirk. He didn't want anybody stepping over the top rope.
Yeah.
That was for the Giant and the Giant only. And I guess he put the word out, and Big John Studd just disregarded it, stepped over the top rope, and the Giant beat the crap out of him.
The Undertaker, speaking on Hotboxing with Mike Tyson, stated it plainly, revealing that on several occasions Andre nearly killed Studd, including at WrestleMania 5 when Studd served as special guest referee for Andre versus Jake Roberts, and Andre used the opportunity to pummel him with such force that Jake later joked he feared one of Studd's body parts might hit him. But sometimes the feud wasn't about size, power, or dominance, it was about something so small and ridiculous that it made the hatred even more real, as seen in Andre's persistent yet petty feud with Randy Macho Man Savage, which all came down to one thing: baby oil, because Savage, known for his flamboyant personality and chiseled physique, would oil himself up before every match to make his muscles glisten under the lights as part of his larger-than-life gimmick, something Andre absolutely hated, a story recounted by Lanny Poffo, Savage's brother.
First of all, Randy and Andre didn't get along at all.
Oh, really?
Right.
Yeah, and the reason was baby oil. I said no baby oil. And Randy's answer was, yeah, your gimmick is being a giant. My gimmick is baby oil.
The oil created practical nightmares for Andre, because due to his gigantism he struggled with everyday tasks, including showering in standard hotel rooms, and getting baby oil off his skin after grappling with Savage was especially aggravating, sticking to him and requiring extra effort to clean, But there was an even deeper reason for his hatred, as Andre's daughter, Robin Christensen Rousimov, revealed that her father had no tolerance for steroids and lost all respect for Savage after he was caught using them, since Andre, who had refused surgical treatment for his acromegaly believing God made him this way, resented wrestlers who artificially enhanced their bodies, a point Savage himself acknowledged in a 2004 interview regarding the one-sided nature of their encounters. What are you going to do against Andre the Giant? He described Andre as a warrior who was in constant pain but still tried to pass the torch the right way, yet as the years passed and his body began to betray him, his patience grew thinner, especially with the next generation who moved faster than he ever could, like Bam Bam Bigelow, nicknamed the Beast from the East for good reason, standing 6 feet 4 inches and around 390 pounds, whose extraordinary agility allowed him to perform high-flying moves like cartwheels, moonsaults, and dropkicks usually reserved for much lighter wrestlers. But this agility became a problem in the ring with Andre, whose acromegaly had progressed dramatically by the late 1980s, requiring a back brace under his singlet, limiting his ability to bump, and restricting his mobility, making matches feel like wrestling a movable brick wall, while Andre reportedly saw Bigelow as a cocky young wrestler who hadn't paid his dues. A situation Bruce Pritchard recounted when Andre decided to teach him a lesson, because Andre didn't like Bam Bam, and going back to watch some of those matches makes it clear why. You can see it, as Andre grabs Bigelow by the shirt and throws him like a rag doll, and on June 25, 1988, at Madison Square Garden, the clash reached its peak, with Andre dominating from the opening bell, delivering hip tosses, suplexes, and full-force slams, standing his full weight on Bigelow's back, landing real slaps and throws, and using the match to teach a lesson to the cocky upstart, causing immediate fallout as Bigelow stormed backstage right after the match to quit the WWF, unable to handle the punishment and humiliation, leaving for Japan and the independent circuit before returning in 1992, long after his encounters with Andre were behind him. And then there was the rivalry fans assumed was built on fear, but behind the curtain it was far more calculated, involving Jake the Snake Roberts, whose late 1980s storyline portrayed Andre as terrified of Roberts' python Damien, with footage showing Andre fleeing and even self-eliminating from the 1989 Royal Rumble, yet the fear was not genuine, as Roberts, who was actually terrified of snakes himself and chose them for their psychological impact to evoke primal fear in audiences, has consistently stated that Andre wasn't afraid of anything and sold the fear masterfully to give Roberts a psychological edge over the seemingly invincible giant, though there was one real-life incident involving the snake. During one of their matches, Damien bit Andre's shoulder, breaking off 2 fangs about 2 inches long that embedded in his skin, but Andre didn't notice at first and continued wrestling, and later in the locker room while playing cards, Rick Rude pulled the fangs out as Andre laughed, joked that the snake must be hungry, refused a band-aid, and insisted it would stop bleeding on its own, because despite the kayfabe fear, Andre's real frustration with Roberts was like his issues with others. He simply didn't like certain people, and Roberts, tasked with taking care of Andre in matches due to his worsening health, suffered injuries like a torn pectoral from Andre's clotheslines, as Andre dominated him in the ring, but they continued shows without complaint, and amid all the stories of him intimidating others, there was still one man whose presence could make the locker room go silent, the only one who could make the Giant hesitate, Haku, as the tales of Andre the Giant intimidating, punishing, and dominating his fellow wrestlers continued. But there was one man who turned the tables, a wrestler who made even the 8th wonder of the world think twice. Haku, also known as Munga, widely regarded as the most legitimately tough and intimidating figure in professional wrestling history, with Bobby Heenan, who managed both Haku and Andre during their Colossal Connection tag team run, revealing that Munga is the toughest man, not just wrestler, I've ever met in my life, and that the only 2 men Andre the Giant feared were Munga and Harley Race, with Haku's reputation cemented by countless terrifying feats, including reaching into a man's mouth with 2 fingers to break off his bottom teeth after the man mocked wrestling as fake, biting off a man's nose in an airport fight, snapping police handcuffs while restrained behind his back, and fighting off 8 officers after being tossed, and during one alcohol-fueled encounter in the 1980s. Andre offended Haku and immediately backed down, an occurrence virtually unheard of since Andre was the locker room boss who humbled everyone else, yet against Haku he knew better than to push his luck, as Eric Bischoff recalled the entire WCW locker room would go silent whenever Haku got annoyed, and during the 1998 DX Invasion angle, Vince McMahon reportedly told DX to run if WCW sent Haku after them, illustrating the fearsome reputation he carried. And finally, not every downfall came from fists or grudges. Sometimes it only took a bottle, a bad decision, and the wrong man watching, as seen in the Fabulous Freebirds, taking us back to 1984 during the WWF's Rock and Wrestling era. The fabulous Freebirds Michael P.S. Hayes, Terry Bam Bam Gordy, and Buddy Jack Roberts were brought in as part of WWF's crossover push with MTV, their edgy party animal image fitting perfectly with the era of Cyndi Lauper and celebrity appearances. But the Freebirds had a problem. They were exactly what their image suggested, rock stars who loved to party. And their WWF run lasted just 57 days, during which they wrestled only 16 matches as a unit, with their departure becoming a legendary tale involving Andre the Giant, who served as the backstage enforcer, as Michael Hayes himself recounted that during a house show in Ohio, likely at a high school gym, he had been drinking beer and taking pills thinking they had the day off, and when they arrived to find they were booked to wrestle, Hayes protested that he couldn't work while Andre, already present as the backstage agent playing cards and halfway through a gallon of wine, spotted him, pointed, and declared, "He's drunk. He's messed up," and though Gordy and Roberts tried to deny it, when they let go Hayes fell flat on the floor, confirming Andre's assessment, causing the match to go terribly as Hayes attempted a top rope move, caught his toes, and took a nose dive, leading him to call Vince McMahon the next day to confess and stand himself off, effectively ending the Freebirds' run, and though Hayes later met with McMahon in Toronto thinking things were okay, a call from Booker George Scott informed him that McMahon no longer trusted him and wouldn't rehire the group, with Hayes repeatedly debunking the myth that Andre directly fired them, calling it a great story and legend but noting that while Andre may have suggested it, Vince made the final call, and the Freebirds never returned to WWF as a unit.